Welcome to the Heavy Spoilers Show. I'm your host Definition, aka your friendly neighbourhood spoiler man, and this video we're breaking down Iron Man 3. We discussed the first two films in the Tony trilogy last week, and this really is the cherry on top in terms of Easter eggs. Throughout this video we're going to be breaking down many of the movie's parallels, the scenes that don't pay off until much later in the saga, and some of the things that you may have missed. This isn't a fully extensive list as the movie's been taken apart more than Tony's armour, but it should cover some of the best ones that you only notice after binge watching the MCU. Obviously there will be heavy spoilers here, so if you haven't had a chance to check out all of the Infinity Saga movies, then I highly recommend that you check out now. Please drop a thumbs up if you enjoy the breakdown, and make sure you subscribe to the channel for videos like this every day. With that out of the way, thank you for clicking this, now let's get into Iron Man 3. Okay, so Iron Man 3, whilst not the culmination of Tony Stark's arc in the MCU, is the closing of his trilogy. We've already talked about how the character had a similar origin story in some ways to Captain America. Both were left with nothing, but due to their heart and a friendly scientist, they were able to go beyond their shortcomings. These similarities were even shown in the death of their mentors, but you may not have noticed that their trilogies also end in a similar sort of way. In fact, each character in the trinity of the MCU heroes, made up of Iron Man, Captain America and Thor, all have a lot of things that line up. For example, Tony has a weakness, and that is his arc reactor. He had to use it to save his heart, but at the end of Iron Man 3 he gets rid of it after finally finding a way around it. He destroys his suits in order to save his relationship and turns his back on being Iron Man. In the Captain America trilogy, Steve's main weakness is his friend Bucky, and at the end of his trilogy he ends up throwing away the relationship that he's built with the rest of the Avengers in order to save his friend. Civil War culminates with him throwing away his shield, and he turns his back on being Captain America, but he manages to save Bucky from Hydra's mind control. In the Thor trilogy, Thor's main weakness is his relationship with his brother Loki, adopted brother, and Loki is able to trick him several times and betray him because Thor trusts him so much. This is similar to how Steve constantly sticks with Bucky even though he does some bad things as the Winter Soldier. At the end of the Thor trilogy, he manages to repair his relationship with his brother, and similar to Iron Man and Cap, who both get rid of their main weapons, Thor loses Mjolnir, realizing the true power comes from within. So yeah, lots of nice parallels where the characters all sort of mirror one another. As for the movie itself, it opens with Tony saying that we create our own demons. Whilst this is definitely the case in this film, it's something that's followed Stark throughout the entire MCU. In Iron Man 1 he refused to work alongside Obadiah, and this eventually caused the character to turn bad. In Iron Man 2, Justin Hammer just wanted to work with Tony, but he pretty much cast him to the side and ended up causing him to become an enemy. In Iron Man 3, a similar situation to Hammer happens with Killian, and of course, Tony would later go on to create Ultron. Tony creates his own demons to the point that it even has repercussions on the other characters. We of course know that he led to both the Vulture and Mysterio being formed, but it goes far beyond that. Tony is one of the main causes of the Avengers falling apart, and in some ways them not being together to take on Thanos allowed the events of Infinity War to play out, which cost the lives of half the universe. So it's somewhat of a poetic way to start the finale of his trilogy, as we know this line would have everlasting effects in the larger MCU. You know, it's like poetry, they rhyme. Anyway, we cut to Byrne and we see Happy Hogan looking like Vince Vega from Pulp Fiction. We also witness the meeting of Tony and Dr. Yinsen, which was told to the character in Iron Man 1. Yinsen said that if he was as strong as Tony was, then he wouldn't remember him either, and yeah, fair enough, the guy had had a few. Tony also shakes hands with Dr. Wu, who would end up removing the arc reactor from the character's chest at the end of the movie. The movie was actually changed for Chinese audiences and had a lot of scenes added, including an extra one with Wu and his assistants Fan Bingbing. Both are big Chinese stars, so these elements were added to attract overseas audiences. Tony's name badge says "You know who I am," which is of course a play on the catchphrase "I am Iron Man" that featured at the end of the first film, the end of this movie, and at the end of Endgame. Yinsen says "perhaps another time," and you bet your life buddy, you'll be meeting again. We can also hear the song "I'm Blue" by Eiffel 65. Though this is pretty upbeat, it actually has a hidden meaning to it about a man who is blue, as in down, and he's so blue that it's reflected in everything around him. This is of course similar to Tony, who, though on the outside seems upbeat and positive, is dealing with the PTSD from the Battle of New York. That's our big reach of the video, I swear. He meets Maya Hansen, who in the comic books co-created Extremis with Killian, much in the same way that the movie plays out. We learn that Killian is the founder of AIM, and he goes to hand Tony a business card, but Tony allows Maya to take it. If you've been watching our breakdown so far, then you'll know that Tony doesn't like to be handed things. The first time this was shown was in Iron Man 2 at the start when he was summoned to the Senate. Later in the movie it happened when he was being served strawberries, and in Avengers it happened at Stark Towers in the interaction with Coulson. The only time that we've found outside of Iron Man 1 where he's okay with taking things is flowers from his father in Endgame. We've often wondered why this is, and after going back and rewatching Iron Man 1, after doing my breakdowns, I think because normally when this happens it brings bad news with it. In that film, Christine Everhart gave him some photographs of the damage that his weapons had done, and in Civil War, which happens after the events of this film I might add, it's to show how bad the Avengers are. We don't know for definite exactly what's going on with this character trait, but as this is the finale of the trilogy, I thought I'd offer up my thoughts. Maya takes the card, and this is how she, not Tony, ends up working with him. Now this is sort of where the Incredibles parallels start. Shout out Super Wizard Magic for spotting that there are a ton of similarities in the film, including a character that idolizes the hero becoming the villain, a relationship being rocked, a character needing to get their suit back, and so on. There's tons of them, so definitely Google that because it's way too much to talk about and to get all of the Easter eggs in one video. It's sort of like poetry, they rhyme. We also see Maya wearing Tony's glasses after he gives them to her, and this would later be reflected in Peter, who takes the Edith glasses. Cut to the present, and Tony is injecting himself with tech that will allow his armor to fly directly to him. I don't know if this is an idea that you got from Thor, but the idea of having a weapon fly to you definitely apes the God of Thunder's abilities. The character is also seen practicing Wing Chun, which is a real-life fighting technique that Downey has actually studied. If you remember our Civil War breakdown, then you'll know we talked about how he uses that when fighting Captain America. We also learned in an article in Iron Man 1 that his robot arm was his first invention, and the small text told us that it was called Dumb E. Here we see it wearing a dunce hat, carrying forth a notion that it's stupid, but it's okay, buddy, I still love you. Now, I have seen some Easter eggs on Reddit that said Tony doesn't have a cut lip, but he does after attaching the face mask. The furthest back I can actually trace this to is a user called IE9WEG, which I hope I pronounced right, who noticed it 3 years ago. After watching the 4K version of the film, on a 60-inch TV, you know how we do, you can see that his lip was cut before the helmet went on, though it's very subtle. I also think there's a continuity error with it, as I noticed that the lip isn't cut when he meets Rhodey, but it is through the rest of the movie, showing that the makeup department needs to get fired. Anyway, the Mandarin broadcast has 10 rings similar to the banner in the first film that was shown in the hostage video, and we also see that Trevor wears 10 rings on his fingers. He talks about Americans stealing the land from Native Americans and then calling it theirs, which could be a hint to how Trevor has taken the mantle of the Mandarin. I don't know if this was intentional at the time either, but we now know that the real Mandarin is going to be in Shang-Chi, so it could also be a nod to how Killian took the name from the villain. The president is known as Matthew Ellis, which may be a nod to Warren Ellis, who wrote the Extremis storyline. We are also introduced to Iron Patriot, which is the new version of War Machine. We learn that this armor was actually created by AIM, Killian's company, and he likely got this contract through the vice president, who we learn is helping him later in the movie. Him creating the armor also shows how his henchman is able to don the suit without any training and complete the mid-air hijack. When Tony meets Rhodey, he talks about how he built a device that is able to catch explosions in the air. Throughout our breakdowns, we've spoken about how Tony constantly upgrades his tech every movie to stop himself from running into problems. Some great examples of this are how he changes from his nanotech shield to an energy one in Endgame after using it against Thanos in Infinity War pretty much depleted his armor. The helicarriers in Winter Soldier also end up using jets after Tony became stuck under one of the turbines in Avengers. Here he's developed this so he doesn't have to fly into space again and risk his own life should a nuke be fired at a city. We see a kid's drawing of the Battle of New York, which is of course a reference to the Battle of New York, and Tony actually climbs back inside the suit from that movie to calm himself down. So yeah, nice little Easter egg that shows it's sort of a little security blanket from that film. Killian shows Pepper the inside of his brain, and the holographic tech he uses and the blue dot layout is similar to Tony discovering the new element in Iron Man 2. We see Tony dumping the Mark 42 below the wine cellar in his house, and we can also see that he has numerous suits hidden below, which is a tease for the ending. Tony also looks up Killian, and we can see that through his phone AIM is flipped to MIA, which hints at how he ends up missing in action in the movie. Yes, we're back to reaching. Pepper wears a very light lilac/white suit, and these have sort of become the colours of the character throughout the series. Most of the movies she wears these colours, and make sure you like the video if you enjoy men that have a penchant for fashion. Anyway, speaking of fashion, Tony sleeps in his black vest that we've also seen throughout the series. This always appears when the character is at his most vulnerable, and it's been a motif throughout his entire journey. He initially wore an Iron Man 1 in the cave when building the Mark 1 armor. In Iron Man 2, when he was at death's door due to palladium poisoning, he wore it when trying to discover a new element that would save his life. Here he wears it when suffering from PTSD, and from that point onward he has to rebuild his mental state from a point of vulnerability. He also wears it in Avengers Endgame when he and Nebula are adrift in space, and it's nice that this tank top pops back up to signify where the character is at mentally. He always comes back though, and you could say, it's like poetry, they rhyme. Anyway, Happy barely survives the explosion, and once more we get a video from the Mandarin talking about fortune cookies and how they're actually American. This once more could be a nod to the cultural appropriation motif. Tony records a message for the Mandarin and then destroys the phone, which, yeah, that message is going nowhere, mate. The Mandarin still gets his address, probably because of all the cameras about, but also likely because Killian already knows it. Also, shoutouts Tater Salad on Reddit for noticing this within the last month. When Tony is scanning for heat signatures, you can actually see one from Springfield MO, which is the same place that Ego planted a seed in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2, so they're likely the same source. Maya shows up to see Tony, and Killian's helicopters come in too. Tony saves Pepper using his suit to rescue her, and he later gives her her own suit in Endgame called the Rescue Suit. Another interesting thing that happens at this point is that Tony takes down one of the helicopters by taking a rocket out and throwing it at the aircraft before shooting it. Pepper also does this at the end of the film to fight Killian, and this shows that she may have learned this move from Tony. Tony escapes with a little helping hand and he goes to Tennessee. Upon landing, he records a message for Pepper, which he has to do through a payphone. This reaches the helmet and Pepper is able to listen to it. We see him leaving another message in a helmet to Pepper at the start of Endgame, and of course to Morgan and the family at the end of the movie. He also meets Harley Keener, who is of course the character that shows up at Tony's funeral at the end of Endgame. Tony also visits a mural set up for the victims of an extremis explosion, and I don't know if it's just me, but I got a lot of flashes of the mural from Far From Home, which we see in honour of Tony. Tony gets to the bottom of the extremis mystery, and he's attacked by Killian's forces. Tony shoots Killian's henchman in the head, seemingly killing him, but if you look carefully, you can see him blinking, which shows that he didn't really die and could be healed. We see Stan Lee playing bingo, and Tony meets someone that modelled themselves on him. You might laugh, but I actually bought some Edith glasses this month, and the wife doesn't let me wear them outside now, but I also feel like an idiot. Anyway, Tony finds the extremis footage, and there's a lot of foreshadowing to Pepper being put in the program, as the woman Tony just killed is seen with long red hair. Do not write, "This boy is reaching." I'm telling you, it's like poetry, they rhyme. Little boy Iron Lad tells Tony to just build something when he doesn't know what to do, and this is how the character has solved his problems in the past, except for Endgame, in which he was saved by Captain Marvel, which is one part of the movie that I didn't really like. Tony goes to the Mandarin compound and finds Trevor, the Truth, does a bit of Wing Chun, and then carries out the airplane rescue. Now can we just give it up for one of the best scenes in the MCU as well? It's nice to see a superhero movie where they actually have a full scene dedicated to just saving people. We get a big twist at the end of the scene when we learn that Tony was using the suit as a drone, and this is something that he learned from Vanko in Iron Man 2, who said the famous lines, "Drone better." Tony launches the suits from under where the wine cellar was, and we get the big fight at the end. This scene has been broken down tons of times and all of the suits have been discussed in depth, so I don't want to retread old ground, but a couple of interesting ones pop up. Firstly, the Mark 41 is able to disassemble and reassemble, and as it's the 41, it was built before the 42 and shows that this design carried over. We also see a spacesuit as well, which Tony likely developed after the events of the Avengers, in that his suit started to lose power and almost shut down, so it makes sense that he would make a suit designed precisely for that kind of environment. Also, we see a larger and bulkier suit that sort of looks like the prototype of the Hulkbuster, which we would of course see again in Age of Ultron and Infinity War and Endgame. Tony also calls the Mark 42 the prodigal son when it arrives, and as we said in our Iron Man 1 breakdown, this is likely a callback to the line at the award show in which Tony is called the prodigal son. Tony fights Killian and uses the Mark 42 to blow him up, and then we get the Pepper scene which calls back to the helicopter. She also destroys the Mark 7 from the Avengers, which could symbolise Tony's PTSD being taken with it too. Tony takes the extremis out of Pepper, she sells some scented vagina candles, and he also gets the arc reactor removed. You can see the scars of this operation on his chest in Civil War and slightly in Endgame, carrying over from this operation. Tony uses the shrapnel from his heart to make a symbolic heart necklace, which he then gives to Pepper. This balcony scene calls back to the balcony scene in Iron Man, in which I think the character first realised that he liked her. Tony throws the arc reactor into the ocean at his home, and this entire scene was actually a full CGI head replacement for Robert Downey Jr., who was injured at the time. Whilst it looks like he's finally given up on being Iron Man, he finds a screwdriver, showing that he will continue building. He saves Dummy, thank God, and the movie ends with him saying, "I am Iron Man," which would of course become a line that's synonymous with the character's chapter ends. It ended his first film, this movie, and with the words that he carried out before doing the snap. The post-credits scene reveals that Tony was talking to Bruce Banner at the end of the film and getting therapy from the character. Bruce Banner is of course the Hulk, which ties in with the Hulk, and yada yada yada, it's like poetry, they rhyme. And that's the Iron Man Trilogy. Obviously, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the breakdowns, and if there's any Easter eggs that should have made the list. Comment below and let us know, and if you enjoyed this video then please drop a thumbs up, and make sure you check out our breakdown of Iron Man, which is going to be linked at the end. I think it's one of our best videos, and you should watch this entire series, so yeah, go check it out now. If you want to support the channel from as little as 99 cents a month, then also please click the join button below. We massively appreciate it, and as a thank you get access to content early. If you want to come chat to us after the show, either follow us at Heavy Spoilers or click the Discord link in the description below. Those are the best ways to keep up to date with the channel, so hopefully we see you over there very soon. This is a channel for people who are super into superheroes, so if that's the kind of thing you like, hit subscribe. Thank you for taking the time to watch this. I've been Definition, you've been the best, and I'll see you next time. Take care, peace.